Okay, let's talk mobility and let's do mobility more importantly. So it's probably 5 minutes and then we're into movement again. Your educators in your room are going to be very vital for this. I think we all need to kind of do it together. Otherwise, if we do show, then do again, then show again, it might get a little bit out of hand in terms of time. So it may be that everyone kind of does it together, and I'll and then ask questions as you go along the way. What I'll just mention is a couple of cool little things. Number one is I'm a big fan of this guy, Michel Delcourt, as you probably gathered. He has this awesome quote. I think it's awesome anyway, which is stability is best trained with mobility. Stability without mobility equals rigidity. Rigidity is the enemy of biology. So what does that mean for us? Well, number one, what you'll notice is every mobility movement that we are about to do also activates the tissues. It activates them as they lengthen. So it stabilizes them as they are being mobilized. It's a very important factor in the way next level do myofascial mobility. A lot of people concentrate on their stability. So they do a lot of strength training, no mobility training, or they'll separate the two. So they do the strength one day and then they'll do the flexibility another day. Yeah. Or they'll do strength and then they'll do flexibility at the end. It's all separated. It's not the same thing. So we can end up rigid. And I think we all see rigid people walking around. And if there weren't a more rigid stereotype, it would be the stereotype of a bodybuilder, wouldn't it? All stability, no mobility. That's rigidity. That walk is a beautifully rigid walk, isn't it? And I thank them for that image that I can draw upon now. We are about to go into myofascial mobility. There are 7 E's of myofascial mobility under the next level system. So 7 E's, there's 7 colors of the rainbow. There's a theme developing. I'm sure you're realizing the theme at the moment. So these 7 points, so they are all going to be elastic. If they don't tick all 7 boxes, by the way, they're not myofascial mobility as we do it. You might have dynamic flexibility. That might be another thing that you can put it under, but it's not this. So they are elastic. So there is that a load unload types aspect to that. They're not in any way static. There's eccentric change. What that means is change happens at end range. That's where the change happens. Is that whatever the end range is for that particular person, there is a change at that point in time. There is an eccentric change, not a concentric change. We exhale on the effort just like we would with anything else. It should feel relatively easy. There shouldn't be a forcing. If we're forcing it at that eccentric end range, then we are not doing it in line with the principles of next level. They are the execution principles when it comes to myofascial mobility. The outcome is there should be a feeling of being energized and stabilized in those tissues in that area. It will produce efficiency and efficacy. Everything should feel more efficient, more effective as a result. And there should be a sense in which you embody, you're more aware of that. You're aware of the health in that area and a certain feeling of power. You know, that's that whole kind of, wow, I don't just feel more open. I actually feel more stable and strong as a result of that as well. So there's a really cool list there that we're going to be doing with each of the movements that I'm about to go through with you. Some of these movements, you'll note, use relative motion. So in other words, we fix one place and move everything around it, which makes sense, right? Because if everything is connected to everything physically, then if we prevent one spot from moving and then move everything else around it, it will affect change in that place. So the way, the reason there's a picture of my family there is because that's one of my dad jokes, is that, you know, relative motion isn't moving with your relatives. It's actually a much bigger concept to be had there. So I could do this, for example, yeah? So I'm trying to affect change in this area and I'm moving this area, yeah? That's motion. If I were to want to do relative motion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix this hand maybe on a wall, yeah? And I'm going to move away, yeah? So this is fixed. I can reach in different directions or move my body away. That's relative motion, because relative to this area, this is the same as this. Because if I straighten up now, look where I am. But we're moving away. What difference does it make, JP? It's the same friggin' thing. It makes a lot of difference. This creates a safety for this area. So let's say this is a person with a shoulder that isn't behaving nicely to them, okay? We do this, they're in agony. We fix that hand to the wall, straight away the nervous system goes, this must be safe. Solid object, this isn't moving. Awesome. Nervous system is calmed immediately. Then we move other areas of the body away from there. So that doesn't just mean the top half. I can actually step away and come back, and then step forward and come back, and step out and then come back. All of those tissues are connected to my shoulder. Yeah. So very, very powerful technique is relative motion. Fix the spot that needs the help, move everything around it. It's a really great thing to remember when it comes to, can people, for example, I'll give you another one because this is a good one. For example, people can't do overhead actions, okay? But we know that if everything's connected to everything, we need their bodies to go into as many directions as possible. But can they put their hands on a wall in front of their shoulders or as high as their head? Safe, yeah. And can they then move away? What have I just created? I've created an overhead action for the tissues of the body using relative motion. So for me, it's a powerful tool in our arsenal to use. You've been sat down for a little while now, so already we're into mobility. So your lovely educators in the room will be with you for this. Now, educators, I'm thinking, let me just stop this share for a moment. I'm thinking that we may need everyone to be going through these together at the same time in terms of timing, because I know we're going to get through these and then I'm going to need to get you guys off to lunch, which is weird for me because it's only 8 in the morning for me right now. So I think educators in the room, you're going to be the demo models when we go through these. I'll have the list on the screen for you and I'll show you that the first one and then the second one, but you guys are going to be doing them in the room. So everyone needs to be on their feet. So we're going to start with this 3D anterior foot slide. So our educators will demonstrate that. I'll demonstrate it too. Remembering the 7 E's. And we're going to go from there. You need to have something solid to actually just guide your movement. So in other words, I've got the outside of my hand on a wall here. Oh, you need to see my feet. Outside of the hand on the wall or on any piece of equipment. If we stay tall, let me show you the movement first of all. So here's our movement. We stay tall. We are affecting change in the superficial front line. The whole body fires up, but we're affecting change in the superficial front line of the leg that is not moving. Okay, so let me show you to camera. Here is our end point. We are in alignment. This is a back-friendly exercise. I'm not asking you to extend over like so. You are in alignment. As you get as far forward with the moving foot as possible. That's when you'll feel the most action on the body through your entire front line. This is an anterior mobilizer and is especially good at the ankle. Now, what I forgot to do, educators, what I forgot to do is the movement beforehand. And I'm glad that you've reminded me that I've forgotten to do that. So everyone, you need to do some kind of meaningful movement. I really like the sit reach because it tells me so much about what's going on in my body. So please do one now. We are unfortunately already one movement in. We should have checked beforehand. So take note. How is that all feeling at the moment? Get an idea of how that's feeling as you're going through that. Pick the ankle that is most glued up. That is the foot that does not move. Do this 3D anterior foot slide. Why is it 3D? We're about to make it 3D. With your moving foot, drive it into different areas and different angles away from your body, whilst always keeping nice and tall with your body. That way, we are affecting much more change in the tissues because the tissues are three-dimensional. Therefore, we want to actually work them in a three-dimensional way. Then go back to your movement. Can you find that actually there is more range? Maybe there's not. But is there more range, especially in the ankle that you've just used as the target for this? This is the first anterior mobilizer. So let's say we have someone who shows a limitation in their superficial front line, and it seems to be coming from the foot ankle region, and there's a limitation in their superficial front line. Here's one go-to movement that you can do. That's our first movement of the day in terms of the mobility section. Now, this is tough to teach through a screen in terms of all the nuances of this. So educators in the room, I'm going to get you to kind of answer questions along the way and deal with any of those nuances or any of the change or anything that might be not looking quite right. That's the bit where you guys are actually fully in charge. I'll just take you through the list. You guys really need to do the rest. Split stance, standing hip drive. That was the one that we did yesterday as our alternative. Do you remember Pablo asked the question yesterday, what's the alternative? I ended up fully standing, didn't I? Now, again, if you have something handy, not to lean on, but as a solid object to guide you, you can actually do that. So it's take a step forward, plant the back heel, make sure both feet are pointing in the same direction, lock out the back knee, soften the front knee, drive forwards with your whole body, not the hip so that you lean back, but forward with your whole body and then come back. If people are feeling it mainly in their calf, then get them to posteriorly tilt, i.e. scared dog, posteriorly tilt their pelvis, drive into it then. You'll probably find it brings it much more to the front. So that's a standing one. So when people aren't capable of very much movement, create this standing position, cue them through that, and work into those tissues. Remember, as you do this, after each one, check with your movement, your global movement pattern or your meaningful movement, and see how it feels after each one. For me, what I would love for you guys to be doing is pick the sticky side and just work the sticky side, yeah? And then check it afterwards. Because otherwise what we're doing is we might be taking something that is imbalanced. We have something that is like much more sticky than the other, yeah? So instead of doing this, where we work that side and bring it into some kind of even, equal balance, all we've done is we've worked both sides, So both sides are a bendier version of the same problem. So that action is a much more nuanced action, but it is very much easier for most people to do. Okay, is everyone good to do the next one? Yes, great. So reverse step with overhead reach. Those of you who do group training, I really like this for groups. It's just such an easy one to do at the start of a session. Everyone kind of does it together. But there are a couple of little things that are, it's really important to remember when you're doing it. I'll show you from the front and from the side. So this is it. So reverse step with overhead reach. Here's the thing though, people kind of do a lot of this business. I see a lot of this, yeah? Basically, no, it doesn't fit the 7 E's, okay? Here's what we do. We take a nice large step back. That foot gets planted on the ball of the foot. Lock out that back knee. Sink and raise the arms above the head. At no point am I extending in my lumbar spine. We're not looking for compression in the lumbar spine. We're looking for length in the anterior chain of the body. So step back, lock out the back knee, sink into that, raise the arms, return, other leg, lock out the back knee, sink and raise, yeah? So if people want more, sink more, not lean back. That's a major, major point of contention for me when it comes to healthy spines. And again, check your meaningful movement afterwards to see how it's feeling. You guys need to take note of what really works for your bodies doing these. Very, very important, because I want you to take away a list of golden movements that really work for your body. You feel both more free in your body, but at the same time, strong and stable in that freedom. I'll check the next one while you're just finishing that. So these are in video form, everyone, so you don't have to remember them all, but I'm also videoing this session too. So kneeling 3D hip drive with tilt if necessary. So you're going to be kneeling for this one, so make sure you've got something nice to kneel on. I will grab a sandbell. So people get a little bit, I can come closer. People think that I'm about to do a hip flexor stretch when I do this, because it looks like that body position, yeah? So again, we're not going to extend the spine for this one, okay? So for some people, this position is already a difficult one to occupy. So from the front, this is already a difficult position for them to occupy. So if that's the case, this is a movement is going to be enough. So the body stays over the top of their pelvis and they're just sinking into that soft knee, back and forth and back and forth. Now, for a lot of people, it might not, because, we've got, there'll be a few people in the room and they can just keep going, bang on it, they're all the way down, right? Because that's not a myofascial mobility. That's just an end range motion thing. So we want to find out a little bit more. So we'll put a posterior tilt on their pelvis and then we'll see what range there is. So this is my range with a posterior tilt. I take that posterior tilt off and this is my range. So posterior tilt for my gluey hip, my right hip, I'm going to take it forward a little bit and back and forward and back. I could bring the arms in. Yeah. As we go forward and back. They're small movements, yeah, small movements, because we've actually asked for end range right from the start. Now, how do we three-dimensionalize this, I hear you say? That's a fantastic question. I'm glad you have asked that. maybe I should just come back a little bit here. So what we can do is, first of all, we bring the arms in, of course, yeah. So that's a very sagittal movement, isn't it? Once we get in range, though, what we can do is we can actually drive the hips left and right, or right and left, and then come back. So we hit end range, drive with the hips, remember. It's a hip drive, not a thoracic drive. So drive in, little left and right, that really asks a bit more. But we can also have the transverse plane involved. So what we could do instead is we could come in and then drive into rotation at the pelvis, remember. The only reason my upper body is moving is because my pelvis is moving. You do not move the upper body without the pelvis driving the action. So I could continue if I wanted to. I'll get to there. I could continue with my upper body, but that actually is just creating a twist in the spine, not a rotation at the pelvis. So we're just doing rotate, rotate at end range, come back. Now, if you then go into your movement, so for me now, it's really starting to kick in because I'm really getting into that gluey front right hip of mine. Have a little walk around and see how that's starting to feel for you as well. It's a very, very nice one. That, I'll let you in on my little secret, that's a real go-to, and about 50% of clients that I see is that kneeling one, because it just really goes at it. If their issue is more at the hip than anywhere else. Now you guys have got hanging things there. I don't, so I'm gonna have to mimic having something to hold on to in my little room here at the moment. But hanging with forward and reverse positions is a really, really cool one. So for some people, what they need is they need a little bit more from the upper body to kind of assist them. So we actually get them to hold on to something above their heads, but their feet should still be able to touch the ground, okay? So what we're looking for is, for our front line, let me just make sure that you can see my feet there, yeah. So I might grab something above. Now, it depends on whether the bar is that way or that way. I love this way, so you got neutral, you know, but quite often bars are that way. So they may be here or here, supine or pronated grip. But here we are. So they take a lot of their body weight, maybe some of their body weight. You can actually take the foot back, lock out that back knee and sink into that position. And then same thing, just imagine that overhead, reverse step overhead reach, but put into a mobility routine where you're hanging from a bar. It's the most beautiful feeling for people. Again, they're staying tall in their spine, but it's a beautiful feeling for people because it decompresses their spine as they're doing it. So it's a way of bringing hanging into decompressing the spine into anterior chain mobility work. Most people really respond well to this one. They really love it. But at its very most basic, you can even do it against a wall with a reverse step and just sink in towards your arms like so. And that would work equally well if people don't want to take their body weight. How are we doing there? That's looking pretty good. People are starting to like things. So remember that back knee needs to be straight. Back knee straight. Looks like people are really enjoying these ones. So remember, once you've done it, return to your global movement pattern and check out how it's all feeling. where you are in your range and in your strength, in your stability. It's good to see the coaching going on in the room. Okay, team, I'm going to go into the prone 3D mountain climber. So that movement that we do, before I carry on, can I just get thumbs to the screen? Who has experienced a change as a result of at least one of the things that's happening right now? Can we get a thumb to the screen if that's the case? I can see a few. That's good. That's really, really good. So I want to do this prone 3D mountain climber next. So in your appraisal, there is the prone one where we use the chair. So I might as well grab the chair. Oh, I've got a chair out there already. So grab the chair. It doesn't need to necessarily be a chair. It can be a bench. It can be anything that kind of brings some space off of the ground, yeah? Now, the thing with this one is that some people say to me, hey, could we do this on the floor? And I say, well, yeah, you could do it on the floor, but that probably means you don't need to do it, if that makes sense. So in other words, if people can be here and they can do this and this, well, the likeliness is that you don't have a great deal of restriction in your front line in the first place if you can actually occupy that position. So what I like to do is give people a chance and have them raised off the ground a little bit, so there is space under their body in order for them to move into. Because if you take people here and this is what you see, they're like this. It's hideous, isn't it? It's just like straight away you've taken them to failure. You know, it's a movement they can't perform. So that will affect their emotional state, which will then affect their tissues, because their tissues are then going to have lower motor unit. Sorry, they're going to get low motor unit activity in their tissues because of the tension they're feeling from their mental stress as a result of failing somewhere. So then they're going to be less mobile as a result. So give them something to actually lean on. And for some people, this is still too low. They still can't get their hip through. So in which case, take them to the wall. And that's where they go next, okay? So just as a reminder, elbows remain straight, shoulders over hands, back knee locked out, front knee soft. As the front knee softens, you sink towards the ground with the hip and come back. So for me, I've already got loads more range because we've already done all these others on my sticky right hip, yeah? But how do we three-dimensionalize that, I hear you say? Well, very similarly to how we did the kneeling one. So here we are. We can drop into that. Shift left and right, come back. Drop into it, shift left and right, come back. This is the pace that we're doing. Left and right, come back. And of course, you can go sink, rotate, rotate at the pelvis, come back. Sink, rotate, rotate at the pelvis and come back. It won't be big. If it's big, you've probably performed it badly. Okay, give those a little go. Then remember to check your global movement pattern afterwards to see how it feels. Remembering throughout that if any of these feel wrong, uncomfortable, or you cannot perform them, speak to your educator in the room about what you might do instead or how to change that, or maybe you just watch this one. So the big thing is keeping that back knee locked out. It's a real tough one to remember because you have to do it consciously because your body wants you to bend that knee because it wants to help you. So it's quite funny from that point of view. So check your movement afterwards and go from there. Good. I'm liking the shimmies. The shimmies are lovely. Liking a bit of shimmy going on there. All right, crew. I'm going to show you the next one. It is called prone Sphinx with head turns. What I have realized is that the Sphinx should probably be the first one I show you all. The reason being is it's such a subtle one, and I created it. The whole purpose of creating this particular one for the front line was for those people that were so, they're just in so much trouble that the only place that's safe for them is fully laying on the floor. So I had a lady that I was helping online in Queensland from Perth, and she had multiple conditions, which meant that all the ones that you've already done were not an option for her. But I knew I needed to open her through the front of her body. So I had to have a bit of a think about that. She was very limited and also highly sensitized from a nervous system perspective. So what I did was I just took her to the floor. Let me see where my mat is. Took her to the floor. Now, this is quite subtle, and I would imagine there would be hardly anyone in the rooms that we're doing right now that will actually feel change as a result of that. But what I would do is I'd have the lady here. I'd have her push up onto her elbows as tall as she can. Then I would get her to look fully to her right and fully to her left, and then come all the way back down, let her chin touch the floor, and then I get her to go again. Fully to the left, fully to the right, and then she come down again. Now there is two things that's going on here. Number one is, just by raising the shoulders off the ground, we know that that front line runs from the sternocleidomastoid all the way down to the toe extensors. So straight away, we are creating some length in the body. By doing the head turn, using the head as a driver, we're actually affecting the tissues more on the left when we look to our right and more on the right when we look to our left. We are putting extra length on those tissues. So that Sphinx is an incredibly important and useful one in your toolbox for people with highly sensitized systems or significant restriction in their body. So for me, it's I include it not because it's one that you're going to use on a daily basis. It's one of those ones that you might use once or twice a year. But certainly, if I was to do a sequence where we gradually intensify the mobility that we're putting into someone's front line, I would start with the Sphinx and go from there. The other one that we do floor-based for the front line is one I call surrender, and you'll see why in just a second. So surrender So we're kneeling. Now, if you want to bring the deep front line into this, I'd actually take the knees wide as well. So what we're looking to do is we're going to come from here. We raise up on our knees, go very tall and fully open and look up. And then come all the way back down again. So up onto the knees, tall, open, look up. Remember, we are not hyperextending at the lumbar region. So here we are. And remember, afterwards, we also check our movement to see how we are going. Okay. Questions in general about that? If you have any questions, make sure you let your educator know. What I will just add at this point in time is, so remember, this has everything to do, just like the body audit has everything to do with the appraisal. People come in, I've given you the body audit on day 2, but it's probably the first thing you're going to do. How are you going? Tell me what your score is today. Appraisal happens. You find limited areas of the body. If they have limited areas, oh, what's going on, Corinne?
Can you just cover, please, somebody's had massive change after doing all these mobilizers, but in their appraisal, nothing came up in their front line. Can you explain why, please?
Yeah. So the question is, Auckland, I don't know if you heard it, is that someone's had massive change after doing all the frontline stuff, but nothing came up in their appraisal from the appraisal as a restriction in their front line. So straight away, and I know the educators will be onto this anyway, what we've got to remember is when we look at this and we go, okay, then it's all about mobilizing this chain of tissue through here, okay? That's what we're doing, but you've shown no real major restriction in that area. But what is that area joined to? Everything else, isn't it? It's joined to everything else. It's also going to activate as a result of doing this too. So there's a couple of elements to think about here. Great question, by the way. Really loving the question. So here we are, no real limitation through here, but number 1, stabilization. We are activating the tissues, whether we be here or here. We are loading and energizing those tissues. So overall, we are creating a far more stable system than we had before. So what does that do? That then goes, oh, nervous system goes, cheers for that. That's really awesome. Everything's really on in that area. So now we can actually give you greater movement and more end range motion than we did before in all planes, because actually you're showing to us that we're safer to use. There's a much more kind of activated, stabilizing state. When it comes to mobility, undoubtedly, for me, the way that that front line is functioning, everything that is connecting into that, where there may be restriction, is actually reassured and has developed some form of freedom as a result of what has happened through that front line. You will undoubtedly have greater mobility in the front line, even though you didn't necessarily have any major restriction there. That doesn't mean you haven't had change there. Yeah, it's weird for someone who's already quite open in their front line to then go through all this and not get more open, right? So it will definitely produce a change from an end range motion perspective. There is a mobilizing change in that. Whether you had restriction there or not, you are more open through that chain, but in a stable fashion. But for me, if you've experienced a big change, for me, it's more to do with point number one, which is the stabilizing effect on that area, which creates a much safer system, which means you're going to be able to go further and better. But what I should have asked at the start, and because I want to make sure that I'm actually speaking to the right point here, is that, Corinne, can you tell me, was the change a really big change in their range of motion and sense of stability? Because it depends on what that change was. I've assumed that's what it was. But can you come on and tell me what that was, please?
So it was just more overall range and less restriction in her ankle.
Great. Okay. Who was it?
Tess.
Lucky one, Tess. Isn't that awesome? Okay. So the repeater girl is actually getting new changes 2 years in to doing this stuff. How cool is that? That should be an idea of how powerful this stuff is for everyone else. If we're going through this again and now we've got this big change. But the other thing for Tess, of course, is the fact that she's 2 years in means that she's experienced a lot of change to get to the point she's at. Okay. So now her body's in a completely new place. So when was the last time she did all 8 of the anterior chain mobilizers, one after the other? Probably not since the last mentorship. So that's the beauty of this, is that you will constantly get epiphanies. So that when you're going to go through, everyone's going through for the first time outside of tests, and we've had a number of people do the repeats. And what you'll find is even the stuff that you know, what you forget is it will still change you. It will still change your body during, because of course you're in a new place now. So you're going to get new things that change, that didn't show change previously, because you've got a new body now, right? That's mechanotransduction in its element, yeah? So for me, link it back to your appraisal and go, okay, then if people have shown limitation in front line during their appraisal, you've now got 8 different things to choose from. You'll develop favorites. Those favorites will be your go-tos. I would suggest that after this weekend is over, you make sure you nail 2 of these in your brains, so you've got a go-to without even having to think to start with. If neither of those work, you've got 6 more to have a look at and see how they're doing and whether it's worth actually kind of going, okay, then, all right. The other thing that I've suggested some people do, and it's been quite helpful, is they've videoed them for themselves. So they've actually done their own myofascial mobilization video, so for each one, so that they can actually either use them as a review piece or individually video them, stick them on unlisted links on YouTube, and use them for their clients and go, you need this link, and this link. This is what you're going to be doing for the next wee while. What I tend to do with my clients is I get them to video me on their phone doing their little mobility routine. So then they've got me in terms of forming the shapes that you need to form with your body and the verbal, so they can actually watch and listen and then really nail it and make sure that they can look themselves in the mirror and make sure that they're actually getting some the right shapes and the right movements in the right circumstances. But that's my favorite thing to do, is send it away with them on their phone. And that's my favorite thing to do of all. What I must just say is, if you're putting stuff on YouTube, not for public consumption, okay? Everyone will have an opinion because they don't know the context of that. That is next level. Intellectual property. So you start broadcasting that to the world, you're going to have a problem with me as well. But out of context, people will straight away start criticizing and start saying, well, that looks like this, and I don't agree with that. It's just like irrelevant. You don't know the context of my relationship with my client and what they need, okay? It's not that this stuff doesn't work, but I'm afraid that people are going to find that out. I don't want any of that. Plus, you're actually disseminating intellectual property, which is mine. Any other questions before we launch into lunch? Launch into lunch. I don't know why I haven't said that before. Any other questions? No, let me just check that the next screen is actually the next set of mobility. It is. So we're doing posterior chain when you come back from lunch. Let's take an hour. It's so weird. It's 37 minutes past 8 in the morning for me. You're about to have lunch. So I'll probably go for a little walk on the beach and I'll see you in an hour. So we reconvene at 37 minutes past the hour, i.e. past 1. We nail the rest of the mobility. Then we go into some training. Thanks, everyone. I'll come back a bit early. If you want to talk to me and ask any questions, you can, okay? Have a great lunch. At this point in the mentorship, some of you are having a whale of a time and it's so freaking awesome and everything's awesome and you feel awesome and it's all amazing, yeah? And I love that. It's awesome for me that you feel that, okay? Then other people are feeling incredibly anxious at this point in time. Oh, by the way, that includes me usually around about halfway through the mentorship. I'm quite anxious because I'm aware of all these differing emotions in the room. And luckily enough, I have my ambassadors telling me how people are going on with this. So we have some people are like, oh my God, it's still a little bit overwhelming. I'm a little bit anxious. Maybe I didn't pick up that last bit well enough. So we've got that going on too. And then we've got some people whose bodies are going, oh my God, I feel amazing. And then other people's bodies are like, I'm a bit grumpy now. Not sure I like that last thing there, okay? So I just want to say a few words to each of those things. And if there's different emotions to that as well, please share with me, okay? Then I want to do as much as I can from where I am to help you. But what I want to do is just give you a few kind of words around each of that, okay? If everything's awesome and amazing, that's great. I also think I recommend that you watch the Trolls movie too, because you're that kind of a person, okay? That's really great, and your body's really responding well to it. My body's the same. I call myself a mobilizer tart because it's like no matter what you do to me, it just feels so good, right? It's one of those kind of a thing, right? So that's my body, but that's not everyone's body. Some of you are feeling like that as well. You are a fellow tart with me. Welcome to the Tarts Club. But other people's bodies might be getting a little bit grumpy, right? And it's just like, oh, I'm not sure this stuff works. The fact you've experienced change shows that it works, okay? It's just not the change that you wanted necessarily, okay? It is not normal in any scale of events to have 8 mobilizers on one chain of tissue delivered consecutively in the same session. That is not a normal scenario, okay? During this session, you're going to be doing about 30 odd mobility movements. That is not normal for any session. What I give when I've finished an appraisal with someone and experimented with a few movements with people, what I recommend you give no more than is 3 across all the lines to send someone home with, because that level of change isn't used, well, the body isn't designed to take that amount of change in that period of time. And remember, our bodies change really quickly. They react really quickly to these movements. So that's 8. We've just done 8 on the same body, okay? So for some bodies that really need that, well, yeah, they have appreciated it and they've gone, yeah, thanks, I love that, really appreciate that. Other bodies are going, no, that was way too much. Or that was a lot of stuff on a line that I didn't really need it. So of course, those bodies are a little bit overwhelmed and they're going to start actually going, oh, with some of that stuff that was held in that line was stabilizing me. So now there's another line that's having to get overactive or even like just work harder or is destabilized and it's complaining at me. That is just a sign that change has happened at this stage, okay? Yes, it's not change that any of us want, okay? But it has happened, and it shows you that it changes a body. As we go through the afternoon, you're probably going to find some movements that ease that. You might find some more movements that actually don't. That is the change that happens as a result of myofascial mobility done in the right way. So remember all of that. I want just to reassure you, remember, we give people the stuff that they most need, not everything, okay? And there is a danger for us, not just with this, but in our work, right? We know so much awesome shit. We want to go bleh and give everything to everyone, don't we? It's like actually going and say, right, I've got to fix this roof. I'm going to bring every tool that I own, and I'm going to use every tool that I own on fixing this roof, whether I need to use those tools or not. We select exactly the right tools for the job in that scenario. We do the same when it comes to this. The guide, your guide, is the appraisal. The appraisal says, look at this and this. Okay, then, what can I use on this and this? I have a menu of things here, a menu of tools that I can use. At the moment, we're on the tools which come under mobility umbrella. In a while, you'll be coming under the tools that come under training umbrella, yeah? But we're going to pick the appropriate tools and use those and send the clients home with those, okay? We're not going to give them 40 mobility movements, are we? It's going to absolutely crucify them. Our bodies cannot change it. They can't cope with that amount of change. Too much, because remember, you change one place, you change every place. You do 10, you send someone home with 10. I've done this, by the way. I've learned. This is why I do this. Because I've learned all the ridiculous, stupid things to do, and then I can guide you away from those, okay? Because I've been a dumbass in my time. So I have given, I think one client I gave 8, right? 8 different things, okay? Ridiculous, okay? What do you think they did? I don't feel too good the next day, right? Oh dear, yeah. I got a little bit overexcited in your case. I might have given you a little bit too much, right? Sometimes it's one thing. You send them home with one thing. Don't think you've underdone it. You've done an amazing job. If you can stick to the principles of what you know and go, I'm going to send you home with one thing, you're freaking amazing, okay? Don't forget that. Sometimes one thing is 100% of what they need. 3 things is 50% of what they need. Yeah, more is not better. Best is better. So that's one thing to kind of take away from this. So then what about if you're at that stage and you're going through this and it's like, oh, I'm quite anxious because I feel like I'm not quite picking it up, or it doesn't quite make complete sense yet. Newsflash, you're halfway through day 2, okay? Of course, there is going to be a level of, I need to know more of this. I need to know it better. I need to practice more. I don't feel comfortable that I'm where I want to be at this stage of the mentorship. No, most of you won't be. That's why we do the mentorship program, and that's why it is a program, and that's why you have support after the program, and it's why there's videos to back up all of this stuff that we're doing. It's there to support you throughout. You aren't gonna fully rely on this weekend and go, okay, then I need to know it at the end of the weekend. Literally need to know everything at the end of the weekend, okay? This is just the catalyst for you to then deepen and embody the learning that you're doing on this. At this point in time, if you're anxious, I can't say don't feel anxious, because that doesn't get rid of anxiety. Oh, you feel anxious? Oh, don't be anxious. Great, it's gone. Awesome. Thanks for saying that. It's not how it works, is it? But what I can say is, be assured we are here to support you throughout that, okay? We have supporting tools for you in terms of video and in terms of personal contact and in terms of group, where you will always be able to rely on reinforcing your learning, asking questions, and you're all going to be at different levels. As in, some people are going to zoom through this really fast, and others it's going to be a 2-year process. It's fine. We're here for you. We will support you in the style that you need to do that. So yes, I understand your anxiety. And yes, I would absolute fireworks would be going on in my head if I was doing this for the first time right now. Absolutely, I'd be in sort of a certain amount of turmoil here and here, because it's just like, oh my God, it's just so much already, right? It's fine, truly. We are here. We will support you. And remember, it's not over after this weekend. It's not one of those kind of weekend type relationships, all right? We're here afterwards. We're here for the long term, okay? What have I covered? So we've done that. We've done the body. We've done the physical bit. We've done the anxiety bit. Is there anything else? No, I think that kind of covers it. I just wanted you guys to have that and absorb that in your mind and in your heart right now. You can be at any of those and it's fine, okay? Wherever you are on that spectrum, it's fine, okay? Because it's you. This is your experience. It's how you feel, and however you feel, completely valid. And to a certain extent, to be celebrated, even if it feels like it's a negative thing at the moment. It just shows that your mind, emotions, and your body are reacting to what we're putting into it. Any questions on any of that? Is there anyone else need any other kind of issues sort of dealt with from that point of view? It's just important to know that, I think, at this point in day 2. What we just did before the break, all of those movements were related to my old mate back here, the superficial front line. That's what we were really playing with here. So remember, toe extensors into tibialis anterior, into knee capsule, into quads, okay? Now, there is no actual physical connection between the lower half and the upper half of the superficial front line, but they do work together because there is a mechanical connection. The way the pelvis moves means that there is a change in both areas of that chain of tissue, the way the pelvis moves. So there is a mechanical connection. So it is as if they are connected, okay? Then we come up from the pubis here, rectus abdominis, sternalis, sternocleidomastoid, and then in fact there is scalp fascia that goes from the top of the sternocleidomastoid around the back of the skull, okay? So when we are putting an opening action through the front of the body, that's what we're trying to actually access, but in different ways. So we started off with that anterior foot slide, because what we're then doing is, we remember from yesterday when I talked about, hey, remember what we're talking about is the foot ankle complex as a major point of sticking, which needs to be mobile. The pelvis, another major point that needs to be mobile but tends to stick. And the thoracic spine, major point that needs to be mobile, quite often stuck, okay? So then, as we go through those mobilizers, what you'll notice is, for example, the anterior foot slide, which opens up the front of the body, is very much actually targeted at the ankle. It's an entire body mobilizer, but it is targeted at the ankle. The kneeling one, much more targeted at the hip. Do you see what I mean? Anything that involves us hanging or having our arms on the wall, more targeted really to the thoracic area. Can you see that? So what we're trying to do is go, all right, then let's give options so that if you see more of a stick in one place rather than the other, let's go after those areas. And that's what this is all about. This is why we give you a menu of those rather than just go, okay, then you got a restriction in the front line. Here's the one mobility movement that you need. No, we need you guys to be specialists in this area. We need you guys to go, okay, then I'm not sure even which one's going to work best on you. We're going to try a few and we're going to pinpoint the one that actually works best on your body, the one that gives you the best feedback, and go from there. We're all good with that. Okay, so that's me talking rather passionately about all of that stuff. But let's get over to here. All right. So remember, we are now on posterior chain. So that's my mate, the superficial back line, which I really love to talk about because it was the first one that I remember, the first one that I remember learning. So what I mean by that is that I could actually say all the tissues that were in one of the lines. So you guys are going to need to be on your feet very soon. So you can be gradually getting to your feet while I'm talking. But just as a reminder, so the superficial back line is longer than you are tall, I should say. So it's kind of a cool one from that point of view. I'll just move my mat over for the time being. So when we get, I'm going to keep my t-shirt on for this bit so you can see the band going up my back. But after that, I'll get rid of the t-shirt so you can actually see the different bits of the chain going on. So the chain of tissue that we want to do now, I'll show you side on first of all, is the superficial back line. So that's the plantar fascia, calcaneus, into the Achilles, into the calves, up through the hamstrings, across the sacrotuberous ligament, into the erectors, into the splenius capitis, into the scalp fascia, ending at the eyebrow ridge. Yeah, ending the eyebrow ridge. When does it activate? Well, it's active now, less so now, okay? So it activates as it lengthens, just like we were doing with the superficial front line. Let me show you that from the back. So here we are. The Achilles tendon becomes the calf muscles. The calf tendons become the hamstring tendons. They are physically joined in one chain of tissue. It becomes the hamstring complex that joins into the sacrotuberous ligament under the butt. There it goes up into the erectors. And here we are, all the way up there. It happens to go over the lateral aspect of the calcaneus, i.e. the outside of the heel bone, more so than the inside of the heel bone. That will become relevant as we get into this. Now, with the good morning movement that we do as part of the appraisal, this we can play with a lot. Because remember what we were saying yesterday about how we can nuance it to actually target the upper or lower portion, or the left or the right. But you can also three-dimensionalize those as well. So just as a quick recap, if I want to get more to the lower portion, I would normally ask the room this, but I'm going to say, okay, then you think to yourself now, what would I do with my pelvis in order to target the lower portion, to really create extensibility in the lower portion? Yes, I'm going to do the instabutt. So the anterior tilt of the pelvis, create some extra length there, and then go into it. So I'm going to then explore that. So with me, I'm instabutting right now. That's the most that I can do. That's what I can get out of my lower portion, and it's giving me something. But elastic movement again, stabilizing, elasticizing movement, okay? We are doing that hydroelasticity piece. If I've been drinking water, which I have, we're getting hydroelasticity at this point in time. But what you'll note is what I was doing with my upper body there, with my instabutt in my case, is that, can you see how I'm driving my body in different directions? Now, that's not my body. That's being driven by my hips. I'm turning my hips and then doing that good morning action as I go. So that's one way we can do it. Another way we can do it is by creating a hip shift, a lateral hip shift, okay? So in other words, what we do is we get ourselves into that position. We go to end range and then we shift, in my case, right and left, then come back off it. Go back in, shift, right and left. Create some shearing across the tissue as we are going, and then come back up. There we go. So that's frontal plane motion. Previously, when we actually rotate the pelvis and create a movement like that, that's transverse plane motion. And then as we're going, let me just check this chat box. Metric movement first. Thank you, Corinne. So we've forgotten to do, when I say we, I mean me. I've forgotten to do the movement first. Can you do that movement? I know we're already into it. So do your meaningful movement, metric movement, your global movement pattern as I list it in the notes. I'm already away because I just love getting to my lower portion of my posterior chain. It's just so much fun to do that. But what we've just done is we've played with it and we've got into, let me, I might need to put my camera down a bit more again. Okay, so here we are, sagittal plane movement as a good morning. Frontal plane movement, hips shift left and right once you're in that lower position, that eccentric change, yeah, eccentric end range change. Transverse plane movement, rotate the hips, go in that direction towards that foot, rotate the hips, going that direction towards that foot. But equally, the same thing can be happening with foot position too. So for example, if I want to get to my left side more than my right, if I take my left foot half a foot length forward and do my good morning, it's going to target the left side more so than the right. So again, that's another really great way of playing with that. So I want to get into my left side a little bit more. So I'm going to just do that into my left side. However, turning my pelvis towards my left foot and then taking my body down also targets that left side, okay? Do we have a question from Welly?
JP, can you just confirm that you've got soft knees? Can you hear me?
Yes. So,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Karina. So there's just a quick question around knees. What do we do with knees? Okay. So they are soft knees, but they're what I would call straight soft. So in other words, I get people to lock out their knees and then unlock them. So it's just like, okay, then lock your knees and then just unlock them. That is where I want you to be when you go into that movement. So it's soft knees, but not bent knees. So what you'll see a lot of the time is people will go like this. So you see them bend a lot. And then you're not really sure where they're getting their motion from, because if I do that, look, I'm doing pretty well with my motion there, but if I do my soft knees, just unlock my knees effectively, then I'm nowhere near as far, am I? So it's unlocked knees as opposed to bent knees is the way I would describe that for anything good morning related. Okay, so that's a big one. Now, I was playing around with this the other day, and what I realized what's worth kind of going through here is, again, the whole nervous system piece, actually calming the nervous system. So sometimes people are just really uncomfortable doing this action. And it's like, it's okay, you've got 7 other things to choose from the menu, you can do those. But what might be worth just trying is actually calming the nervous system a little bit by either having a stick or a chair or something like that in front of them. So what am I talking about? So here's the thing. So watch what happens for me. This is where I am now, okay? This is where I am now, okay? The moment I put my hands here, my nervous system calms. And here is where I am, okay? Now, do I get to keep that? Yes, I do, okay? You see that? That change happened as a result of calming my nervous system, allowing the body to go, okay, then I've gone further. I've gone further now. I've had a bit of extra support. Here I am, just moving up and down in that bottom portion. Then I can work up, come back in. My body's then gone to that place. So now look at that change. That is how you can interact with your nervous system to calm it. You go into a range of motion that is far greater. Nothing bad happens. So your nervous system then goes, that seems a safe thing to do. Let's try it without the extra support. So by placing your hands on a wall or on a chair or on a stick, it could produce a dramatic change in what goes on in your client's body, okay? So if you are struggling with your posterior chain, use that, experiment with that, and see if that actually helps you when it comes to working into that. For me, it's quite dramatic, and also then it's really lovely for myometric movement as well. Straight after that, I'm playing with that, and it feels really damn good. Okay. All right, any questions before I move on? No questions? No? Okay. So we've done good mornings, and then I've also covered just there the split stance good mornings. So we are still on, just as a reminder, this is all superficial back line work, but of course, everything, literally everything is whole body. It doesn't matter. We are affecting the entire body with every single movement we're doing, okay? But what I would like to share with you next is the pigeon toe sit and reach, or the pigeon toe sit reach action. This, if you are working with groups, is your go-to for groups. So remember for the front line, we were doing the reverse step with overhead reach with a locked knee at the back. So what I would be doing is I'd be doing this with my groups, you know, a few of those each side. Then I'm going to go into pigeon toe, sit, reach, okay? So let me show you from the side, actually. So I turn my toes inwards, and I'm literally doing almost like a squat pattern with a reach forward and then come back up. There are different ways that you can play with those, of course. If you choose to go a little bit taller with the legs and actually make it more of a reach pattern, you can do that, or you can make it more of a sit pattern. Now, the lateral aspect of the calcaneus comment that I made earlier, remember we said it comes up and goes over the lateral aspect of the calcaneus? Simply by turning your heels outwards creates extra length tension on the posterior chain of the body. So doing that in the first place, then taking a whole body global movement pattern through that, you will feel it in other chains, don't get me wrong, is a really great way to ask that little bit more of the superficial back line. And it's really easy to do. It's something that you can do with an entire group so damn easily, isn't it? So it's like, okay, then reverse step and reach. Okay, then, all right, then now I want you to do some pigeon toe sit and reach, please. It's a very easy one for a group. But generally, have I given that one-on-one to people? Yes, I've given it one-on-one to people too. So what could you then do to three-dimensionalize that a little bit more? Give me some demos as to what you might do with that action, just to three-dimensionalize it. So Nikki's doing arm drives side to side. You take your body in a different direction. You could do a hip shift, a lateral hip shift with it. There's just so many different ways of playing with this, isn't there? Yeah. So it's still true to the action, but you're just taking your body into different places as you go. I'm loving all the interesting dance moves that are being invented in front of my eyes. I'm so impressed, crew. I feel like we need music now. All right. So that was the pigeon toe sit and reach. We're going into hanging. Now it says as per anterior, which is a lie really, isn't it? Because actually what I want you to do is take your feet forward. So previously when we were doing hanging, by the way, repeat this, just check to see how you're doing with your movement, because you probably find that again, a lot of you will be having a few results for yourselves with that action. Remember, you should get freedom, but also feel safe and stable. That's what we're aiming for with this stuff. So when it comes to hanging for the posterior chain, number of things you can do. Remember, the feet need to be touching something solid. So in other words, if it's fully off the ground, get a chair or foam block or something underneath, a bench. Make sure you can do this. But if you're taking your load, taking hanging load, in other words, your body, the load, the organic load, and you're sinking into that one at a time, you want to kind of hang back into it as you sink. Yeah, so you're doing one at a time, like so. But you can, and I can't demonstrate this very well, but you can always just sink backwards as you hang and do both at the same time. On a wall, I'd be doing something like this. So I've got my unlocked knees, but fairly straight. I'm going to sink back and go as far as I can, and then come up. And sink back and go as far as I can, and come back up. Then, what else could I do? I could play with my hips, couldn't I? I could go anterior tilt, posterior tilt. That would be kind of a cool thing to do as well. I can go one leg at a time. I could sink back and do a frontal plane movement with my hips. Sink back and go right, left, come back up. Right, left, come back up. So there's all the same things in terms of frontal plane action with your hips, transverse plane action with your hips, but sinking into that whilst you're actually decompressing your spine. A lot of people really love having that hanging action because you've got that decompression, but also at the same time, you've got the calming of the nervous system because you've got your hands in touch with a solid surface and your feet in touch with a solid surface. So yeah, big fan of those things. I'm getting a bit warm, team. All right, I hope you're enjoying these, team. I love a good mobilize. Question?
Yeah, just something that was asked before by one of them.
Yeah.
How do you yourself explain to a client to differentiate between a positive and a negative pain? So a pain that might be going to cause damage, or a pain that's actually, oh yeah, I need more of that. How do you explain that to a client?
So first of all, when someone says, oh, that doesn't feel right, or it feels painful, or, I'll say, first of all, I want to clarify what they're feeling. I want to know that what they're feeling is negative. So I'll say, okay, then, so is what you're feeling pain or discomfort? First of all, we need to kind of clarify between that, because some discomfort, we're okay with, because actually that takes us towards our goal. It's just like having some discomfort the day after a workout. You're in a stage of growth at that point in time. So first of all, we need to know, is that pain or discomfort that you're feeling? If it's pain, we pay attention to it, because pain is never something that our body is telling us about without us needing to take action to the contrary, as it were. Pain is something that we do not want. So I'm not going to say that's a good pain if it's an actual pain, all right? What I'm going to ask, first of all, is interoceptively is what I'm going to ask them, really, isn't it? I want them to get in touch with that and go, okay, is it tension? Is it restriction? Or is it just, are you feeling something in that area? So is it tightness, or is it tension? Because a lot of the time people will explain something like tightness when actually it's just length tension, for example. So pain, yes, if it's pain, we need to pay attention. I'm going to pay attention. It's not what I want. there isn't for me such a thing as a good pain when it comes to this kind of stuff. I don't want people creating a creation of pain in that. If it's discomfort, that often means change is happening. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's taking them to a bad place. Where it's taking them is to a place which is different. Okay. So again, is it a worry or is it just different? So that we need to clarify as well. Okay, then. All right, then. So you're feeling, is it pain or this? Oh, well, yeah, it just doesn't feel quite right. Okay, then. So it feels different. Yes, it feels different. Well, cool. Let's first of all celebrate the fact that this movement has created a change in you, because that was the whole point. You came to me wanting change, and we are using movement that is creating change in your body. Now, what we need to know is if that is uncomfortable in that area, have you got greater range of motion? Do you still feel more stable there than what you go into? So it's like, yeah, okay, then I'm uncomfortable, but you're uncomfortable. And when you came in, you were in pain and could do this. Now you've got some level of discomfort in a new place that you didn't feel it before, but you can do this. Okay, so can you see then? All right, then. We're on a good thing here, because once you come to their metric movement, meaningful movement, global movement pattern, whatever you choose to describe it as, if there is an improvement in their overall situation, is that a bad thing? Change is happening. They're feeling some new stuff that sometimes they describe as pain, and it's just not, because once we actually nail down interoceptively what they're feeling, it is new and different. And it's tension. Quite often what I find is, and I know the educators in the room will have their own, they'll be able to contribute themselves to this as well. Quite often what happens is blood flow, hydration is getting into an area for the first time in freaking years, right? So they're feeling this kind of, it's gone really hot. Oh, okay then. Is that kind of like heat? Is it a bad thing or is it just hot? Right? Is it just because that suggests that blood flow is getting through? And that's a great thing from my point of view. So nearly all aspects of change that is felt, nearly all of that is a positive signal that something's going well. If it's pain, I see that as a problem and something we need to go away from. I don't know if that was useful as an answer, but whoever answered that question, you can either wave or give me the big cross to say, no, you're useless. That was crap. Oh, we got a thumbs up. That's good. All right. Excellent. So later on in the break, if educators in the room, if you want to add your 2 pennyworth to that, because I know that you guys are going to have your own brilliance when it comes to that, that would be really, really cool. So thank you for throwing that in. Make a note to do that later on. We are going to move into pistols now. We're going into pistols. I like this one because when people want to move, sometimes they don't want to, you have those personalities and they come in, I hate all this kind of namby-pamby mobility crap, right? Okay, then it's all right. We're going to just do some dynamic movement to get you ready for the next kind of bit. So when they're doing their posterior chain stuff, a walking pistol is a real cracker. So I call it a pistol because there's such a thing as a pistol squat. it's going way short of there. Okay, but I'll show you because it's also quite a it's a cool kind of funny walk as well. I'll show you and then I'll talk you through this. This is my walking pistol. Okay, so we're really targeting one at a time there. Now, as you land the front foot, you stay on the heel and you actually dorsiflex, so you're pulling your toes up. This knee is still unlocked. It's not locked out. It's unlocked, but it is pretty straight, okay? You sink into the other leg though. So you're sinking into this leg, but this is the one that you're playing with. And then, just like a good morning, you're taking your body with a nice tall spine through the action to end range, and then you're going to come back up and go to the next step and do the same damn thing. It is really quite effective for a lot of people, and you can just get them walking around. So it's very much, we've called this a number of things in our time, because depending on where people hold their hands, we sometimes call it dino chicken, because we'll get them with the T-Rex arms up here, and then they'll walk around the room, and it'll be a bit like dino chicken, all right? But where you put your arms, you can play with where you put your arms. You tell me where you want to put your arms. But remember your target. Your target is the posterior chain. So that would suggest if you're driving your arms forward, it would put some extra length on that chain. If you're driving your hands downwards, it would put some extra length on the chain. You may not want to do that though, because they may be kyphotic and collapsing through that, in which case you may want to put your arms where your thumbs are pointing backwards, for example, because that will keep them tall through their cervical and thoracic spine. Can you three-dimensionalize this? Wow, that's an awesome question, team. Thanks for asking. Well, as you go, yeah, you can, can't you? Because if you're in this and you take a step and you go into that, you can do a hip shift left and right, can't you? Before you come back up. So now you're fully in to sexy mode, okay? Drive the hips left and right. Ah, yeah, drive it left and right. As you walk, getting frontal plane action with our pistol walk, yeah? Walking pistols. I love that. Then you can go, oh, could we put some transverse plane action in there as well, just for a little bit of, just spice it up a little bit? Yeah, we could. We can either rotate towards that front knee, yeah, so we're rotating our pelvis and our chest towards the front knee as we go, or you can drive your hands towards that leg as you walk as well. And that can be a really nice extra little boost to that also. So at this point, I don't know about you, but in my case, because of where I've got my tension, my hammies are just singing to me at the moment. And I mean singing. They're not complaining at me. They are singing to me. Do we have any questions at this point in time? I'm loving some of the arm movements. Well done, Nikki. I wish I'd had that on record at the time. All right, gang. I'm going to do a little kneeling pistol, and then we've got a little topic to cover as well that Corinne's just reminded me of. So check with your movement, remember. How are we doing through here? Because remember, we should be freer and more stable as a result of doing these, not less free, less stable, or in pain, okay? If you're finding that that's the thing that's happening, then of course they may not be the ones for you. All right. So kneeling pistols is something a bit different, and we can actually play with this a little bit. I'm a big fan of how, if we can combine, things so that we get more happening. I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff. So when it comes to kneeling pistols, it means that we're doing the same thing, i.e. we're in this action, but we've brought it closer to the floor, yeah? If people need some stability either side, we'll put them next to the wall so they can actually guide themselves there. So they're still unlocking their knee. So that's me knee locked. I can unlock my knee a little bit, and I drive my body towards towards the floor, basically. Still keeping a tall spine. Very, very important, yeah? So that's a kneeling pistol. Could I go kneeling pistol and then three-dimensionalize it, do some frontal plane action? Absolutely, that's a hip shift left and right. Or could I do some, let me show you front on with that one actually. Or could I actually bring some movement. Most people want to just go towards, but remember, you can actually go away as well and then come back off that. So that would be a kneeling pistol. All right, so check how they're feeling and then watch this one. You know, earlier on when we were doing the anterior chain, so we're doing the front of the body, superficial front line, and we had this body position where we're here and we're driving into that and we're working on that. If you happen to have someone, for example, like me, I'm set up now, my left foot is forward, my right knee is down. And I wanted to, by the way, most of the time we tend to do these active, so we have toes are kind of driven into the floor like that. But if it's more comfortable for people to have their foot flat, that's fine. So here we are. What I could actually do, I've got a right-left thing going on, right? My left superficial back line has restriction. My right superficial front line has limitation at the hip. So this is just an absolute gift for me, because what I can do is I can do that butt tuck. So in other words, posteriorly tilt my pelvis, drive into that. Then I can sit back, bring my toes up and go into my superficial back line. So here I am, superficial front line, superficial back line on the left. Front line, back line. All in one beautiful little flowing movement. Isn't that lovely? And then I can kind of get up and actually just check, how does that work for me? Well, you can probably tell things are going pretty well for the old JP body at the moment, because they're the two that my body really wants, needs, and indeed loves. So play a little bit with that. Let me just check. Okay. All right, gang, everyone ready for the next little bit? Got a little announcement to make next, okay? Because I don't think I've pushed this home far, enough, and Corinna's just reminded me that I really should. I want to talk about emotions again. As I said earlier on, our interoceptors carry emotion for us. They tell us about the emotion in our body. We hold emotion in different areas of our body. A lot of it is in the deep front line, but we find it everywhere for people. So of course, movement will create freeing in certain areas. If those areas are held as a result of an emotional stimuli, as opposed to a physical stimuli, well, then we are changing ourselves with movement, with the physical. We're working back into the emotional, aren't we? So what can often happen, especially as we move through these movements, like into that Saturday afternoon slot, what can happen is you can feel unexpected emotion, and they can be any emotions, but quite often we will see changes in people's emotional state. Some people go quiet, some people cry, some people go kind of ambivalent. People feel funny, in inverted commas. They just don't feel quite themselves for a while. And that's because we are affecting movements that is physically changing tissues, but interacting with the 3 HD, remember, the 3 human dimensions. We're interacting with the mind, our heart, and our body with this. So movement will create emotion. Movement will move emotion as well. So if we're unlocking areas of our body, of course, there may be emotional elements that put that there in the first place. So emotion can come out. It is pretty much always to be celebrated. We embrace that whole concept of having emotional release when you are having physical release. It's just such an amazing thing. For me, when I see emotion in a room, I am so happy for that person, which probably sounds really wrong, because I look across and I see tears, for example, and I'm like, oh my God, they are so lucky, right? The reason being is that tears don't happen when change isn't happening. Tears happen when change is happening. Tears can happen when growth is happening, right? Tears happen when something is meaningful to you, when there is some meaningful thing happening in your life. Tears come, okay? So for me, yes, my empathy is right there. And I'm going, wow, heart to heart there. I'm like, wow, I really feel for those people at the moment. But behind that, I'm also excited because I know that they're experiencing a deep level of change that they wouldn't be experiencing otherwise. So remember, if you feel just different in your emotional state as a result of going through this afternoon, that's to be celebrated, absolutely celebrated, because we're demonstrating how movement can change us as mentally, emotional, and physical beings. It's incredible, and it is to be celebrated. It's to be embraced. And remember, the rooms that you are in couldn't be more supportive, couldn't be more empathetic. If you need a shoulder to cry on, there's going to be several in that room that are going to help you through, okay? And just because you feel that way in that period of the time, that doesn't mean that's the rest of the day like that for you. But it will absolutely change you fundamentally at the human level when that happens. So embrace change, right? And that includes what happens with your emotions. Any questions on that before I do the last couple of mobility movements? We all good? Oh, Karina's running to the screen. Oh, thank you, Karina. So no, we're all good in both rooms, yes? Okay. So we have a couple more on this posterior chain. Remember, we're still we're calling it the superficial back line, but really these are whole body mobilizers, aren't they? But we're targeting the posterior chain. So I haven't done drop heel good mornings or moving down dogs, okay? So if people seem to have that issue where their back line, they seem really limited in that lower portion, i.e. that kind of calf into foot portion, what I tend to do is do something called drop heel good morning. So I'll get something that'll actually, I've got all sorts of stuff, like I can get this in. So their feet, their toes are actually higher than their heels. You can get them on a low step and then, just drop down like that. But it's best to have them in contact with the floor. So it might be, I should move the camera so you can see my feet too, hey. So it can be a low step, which I've actually got just outside my door here, or we could do something like this and raise the balls of my feet compared to the heels. Still, I'm unlocking my knees and we're gonna go into that there. Now, it's pretty standard. I mean, it doesn't take, it's not rocket surgery, is it, to actually work out that would be a good thing, and it would really ask a little more low down as we go into this action. But for someone like me, who's actually got more of a limitation on the left than the right, can you see that if I were to do my good morning, if I show you diagonally here, with my left foot on there and my right foot not, actually that would ask more on my left side, so that then I could actually go into that and almost get an equal change across my body as a result of that. So find something where you can either drop your heels off of something or raise the front of your foot up on something and just feel what that feels like. Remember, people, if anything just isn't feeling right and you need to bow out and watch these things being done, step out and watch, everyone. You don't have to perform absolutely everything if it just doesn't feel right for you. If people you raise the front of their foot and they're just not going anywhere, well, they obviously don't need that, do they? It's too much. But, creep it up slowly. So I can see a weight plate being used in Auckland there, which is an ideal starting point from my point of view. It's a good idea from that point of view. Now, moving down dogs, I might just go straight into that if everyone's okay with that. Has everyone checked their metric movement just lately to see how you're going, see what's happening for yourself? Have you started writing your list of golden movements that would really help you? Because I'm just Yeah, my body's really loving this Saturday session at the moment. So for some people, we need to relate to people in different ways. And from my point of view, if downward dog is a term that they're aware of, we can play with that in terms of making it much more in alignment with the 7 E's of myofascial mobility, okay? So we can start thinking about that. But for me, at that kind of beginner's level, I would rather their hands were higher than their feet on the floor so that you can push back into that. So a moving down dog, oh, by the way, I don't look very good doing these. I tend not to do them because I find them difficult to do. Plus, I just don't get the range that I want that a good morning would give me. So of course, I'm not going to choose that one because it's less effective on my body. But for some people, it might be more effective, which is absolutely why we show you, yeah? Everything doesn't work on everyone. That's the entire point of having the menu. So moving down dogs would look something like this. And there's a couple of ways of doing these, which I wanted to kind of talk to you about. So again, I've got soft knees. I find it really difficult to keep, you know, just to the unlock thing. They kind of tend to soften quite a lot. But can you see, this is still another way of putting length tension on that posterior chain. By all means, you can do a moving down dog on the mat, and that's absolutely fine. So play a bit with that before I kind of go into the nuances of it all. Just have a bit of a play. But like I say, I like the hands being high. You can push back into that a little bit easier. Or in my case, I find it a little easier. But that's because I've got limitation in my thoracic. So I find it good to have that extra bit of help of having my hands a little higher. Let's have a look at how we're going here. Thank you, Karina. I can see Wellington much better now. I really appreciate that. That's good. And who wouldn't want to see a whole heap of moving butts on a Saturday afternoon, hey? Very, very important. Appreciate the appreciate the smiles, team. Definitely impressive set of derrieres in the mix there. So the way then I want to kind of play with that is on activation. So for some people, what they need to do is drive from the pelvis, and you're gonna kind of realize that you are doing one of these two, okay? In other words, they lift from the pelvis. So if I'm here and I lift from my pelvis, I'm driving, my pelvis is the driver. I'm literally pulling my whole body up using my pelvis, and it's pulling me into this position. However, you could push with the arms. So I'm now driving my pelvis back with my arms and pushing back into that as well. So what you'll find is that most people will lift with their pelvis, okay? If people want to try both of those methods, you may get a better result as a result of using a push rather than the lift with the butt, a push with the hands. So it comes more thoracic, you know, in terms of power. Or it might work better as a lift with the butt. So I work better as a lift because I've got limitation in my thoracic already. If I activate it even more, I'm going to lose range once it gets back down here to my back line, yeah, because I'm already tight. I overactivate it if I'm pushing with my hands. That then takes some of the elasticity from the bottom of my body into the top of my body, and I have less range. It's a less effective mobilizer. Then, of course, can you three-dimensionalize it? Absolutely you can, can't you? Because as you're coming back up here, in my case lifting, I can drive left and right, come back, and I can go back up, and I can rotate at the top also. So we can actually create this change with three-dimensional actions. I knew Nikki in Auckland would love this because it just speaks to your strengths, Nikki. Good, great butt action, everyone. Loving the butt actions. What haven't I done? Oh, that's everything, right. Okay, so if anyone has questions on posterior chain, that was the list for that superficial back line. That's where we are now. How are we doing, team? Any questions, first of all? Questions in the room, in either room? Any questions for me? Nothing in Auckland? No questions in Wellington. Thank you, Corinne. All right. Everyone, I'm hoping now is going to be ready to go to the next level of mobility, because we are now going into the lateral line mobility movements. So we've got 7 here. They're quite different, but we'll go in order and let's see how you go. Remember, I'll have one of the educators in the room will no doubt be demonstrating as I demonstrate too. But we're going to start with the stand. Oh, let me just go through the tissue first. Hey, let's go through the tissue first. Let's just do a quick recap of what we're doing here. So we're now into the lateral line here, okay? So remember, it starts at the base of the first and fifth metatarsal, comes to the outside of the heel here, look, outside of the ankle, sorry, here, into your perineals. Perineals linking onto the fib heads there become the IT band. Here we go into internal, external obliques as we come up through here, and they crisscross, so they can create some rotation in our body. And then here we are, sternocleidomastoid again here, okay? So it goes up the outside of their body. What might we load the tissue on the outside of the body if we know that tissues are loading long when we are upright to gravity? Well, we've already done one, of course, the basic one that we do in the appraisal. This next one, that's good. Let me just check that we're okay here. I'm going to put my shoes on so you can see my feet a little bit better. You can see the movement with my feet. So I'll put those on too. No one make faces behind me because I'm not going to be looking at the camera, okay? I can't reprimand you for that. So yeah, you can see my feet a little bit better now. So this first one, do you remember we've been doing this kind of stuff where we're going, okay, then is it more ankle related? Is it more hip related? Is it more thoracic spine related? This is more ankle related, but it's the entire lateral line. And it's a relative motion piece. So in other words, the side that isn't moving is the side that we're looking to change. So with this, as instructions go, you measure your own foot length away from the wall, and that's where you are going to stand. That's the distance you're going to be from the wall. Your hands are going to be at shoulder height. You are going to unlock one knee. So I'm going to work my left side, unlock one knee, and I'm going to create a hip swing. What does that mean? It's this. I'm going to go through some nuances, okay? So on the right side, it's going to look like this. Soft knee, I'm driving. Now, my body is staying facing to the wall. I'm not rotating my body in a different direction. My chest is still facing the wall here as I go, okay? So I'm facing the wall with my chest. I'm driving this movement from my hip. But what you'll notice is my front foot, the moving foot, is moving along the ground. I'm not here. I'm not reaching up here like that, okay? And as I go across, I don't lock out my back knee. That's a classic. I see that all the time. People are looking for extra stability from locking a joint as opposed to getting it from their soft tissues. So here we are. This is a hip swing, keeping the hands where they are, and it supports a tall spine throughout the movement. Check your movement first, then do this. See which one is tightest. Work that one first. Remember, the tight one that you want to work is the one that isn't moving. Steady rhythm, everyone. Steady rhythm, not too fast. When you've done one side, check your movement and see what change that makes. Okay, team, I'm going to look at the next one. All right, I'm going to do, so the group one is pretty easy. We can move through that pretty fast. And that is the one that you do during the appraisal, i.e. this and this. That's the one that you can do in groups. It's pretty easy, isn't it? You learned it, you've hammered it yesterday, you've hammered it today. So you drive with the hips. Bring your arm up to help lengthen that. But by the way, if people have got dodgy shoulders, they can just be here. And it's all about just driving into that, okay? Thing to avoid with this one, I didn't mention this yesterday, is people doing the wiggle, yeah? I'm gonna put my hands on my hips here, so hopefully you can see me. But this happens. They think this is doing their lateral line mobilizer. No, that's just doing Marilyn Monroe, okay? What we want you to do is drive across with the hip and open up this elastic band traveling on the outside of our body, but without collapsing too much in your upper body. So drive into that, drive into that. If they're happy to bring their arm into it, then help bring their arm into it too. Let's see where they are. Knees are still soft, okay? So that's that basic one that you will know from the appraisal, but that doesn't mean it's not effective, because what you probably found yesterday was even after doing the appraisal, your body already started to feel a little bit better because they're producing change, aren't they? So quite often I'm doing a metric after every every one of the 4 movements that we do in the appraisal. I'll do a metric after each one, because if there's a big change after each one, it's like, oh, right, okay, then we've already got change. How did we get that? Because you've done all 4 by then. I wonder how we got that. But normally people already start to feel change just by doing the appraisal, which is really, really cool. The way we can play with that, though, you've had some hints yesterday, is with foot position, okay? So for example, we know that people are actually more limited at their anterior lateral, i.e. the front of their lateral line, as opposed to posterior lateral. So what might we want to do for them? Well, yes, you can actually bring the opposite foot forward and drive into that, can't you? But what else can you do? So one of the things that I like to do for me, because I've got anterior lateral issues, not the only issues I've got, I can tell you that, but I can actually, instead of just bringing it a bit forward and driving into it, which is very effective, I quite often like to do the step across and then into it. So it's like I'm doing a hip swing, but here I am going there. And that for me is a really beautiful movement. And you will have seen people doing that. But we need to make sure it goes to the 7 E's, don't we? It's elastic, yeah? It's energizing. We're being specific about the length and where that length is going on and coming back to. And we are not lingering at the end range, but we're also not going too fast. There's a sweet spot. It's a rhythmical, steady action. This is basically a great speed if you want to effect change, okay? So one of the things probably worth mentioning at this point in time is that if people get good at their mobility routine, they tend to speed up. So they're just going bang, yeah, bang, yeah. So what happens there is, apart from if you're me, where I get really unstable, but they start doing a bit of this, okay? What does that do? It actually heightens the response, but not in a good way. What then happens is it starts to stiffen, because the only way it can give you those kind of responses is if it stiffens the tissue. So people going too fast, they're probably going to, if their goal is mobility, they're going to be driving themselves away from their goal by going too fast. Similarly, if they're going too slow and they're lingering in that area, they're actually destabilizing the tissue. They're not also getting the result that they want. So remember that. So foot position can be good. Okay, so that's for, obviously, for getting into that anterior lateral. But posterior lateral, we could just go here. Yes, we can just drag that foot back and go into it. That's a nice stable way of doing it, but they can go in here as well. And that would work pretty good too, right? So you're effectively just taking a step back and you're getting more into that posterior lateral. If you wanted to do both, okay, you want to do all of that, what I do is walking lateral hip drives. So again, you want, you like your walking pistols for people, they want to kind of get into that. You can do walking for the front line, you can do those walking. For the lateral line, what you can actually do is small steps, drive right, drive left, step, drive right, drive left, step, right, left, step. And people kind of like these because they normally get a little bit further with them, so they feel like it's a bigger movement, feels more dynamic for them, But that is getting both anterior and posterior lateral, but still stabilizing along the way, making sure that after you've done these, please repeat your metric movement afterwards. Looking like some really great movement going on in the rooms that I'm seeing. Recheck your movement and see how it's all feeling. Okay, I'm moving to the next one, team. Sing out if there are any questions. So we've done basic lateral hip drive, then we've got lateral hip drive with split stance feet and arm drives. I've done that also as a walk for you as well. Then hanging, either single or both arm lateral hip drives. Now for me, I happen to know, a little birdie told me that there's someone in the Wellington group that has significant restriction in their lateral lines, okay? And for me, my go-to for that particular person would totally be a hanging lateral hip drive, because I feel like you got two elements to that. Number one, if people kind of like their strength work, they're normally quite strong, those people, is actually if you can bring in some element of kind of strength feeling to that, it's really great. But also it calms the nervous system, having the feet and the hand in contact with something. But you can just shift into it in a really safe way. So the beautiful thing about that is that I'm going to need to just stabilize myself. So ignore the fact that I've got a viper standing next to me, because that's just so that I can do the action. So I'm hanging up here. I want to do my right side. I'm going to take a single arm, in this case, above my head and grab that. My feet are going to come close together. So that already extends the length here, because they're not as long here, are they? Because there's a crease here and a shortening here. If I bring them together, there's a lengthening through my hips. I grab above my head and I soften my knees, and I literally just hang into that action and then come back. So I literally just sink into it. I give myself to the movement. That, for a lot of people in the hanging version, is great. But also both hands, you can do it with both hands too, but the single arm takes you further, but a lot of people aren't strong enough to do single arm, okay? So you're driving into that. Literally, as I say, you give yourself to the movement, yeah? You are giving yourself to the movement. Find end range and come back. Find end range and come back, okay? Now, I'm also seeing some really good versions of it there as well. In Wellington, I can see, yeah, Pablo, that's great. So that's keep doing that for me there. Both hands off to the side. Oh, both hands off to the side and then driving into the long side. This is another great way of getting into that, okay? And then you've got the help to come back up. Here's the thing to remember though. Because you're sinking into that, you're giving yourself to that movement. What you've got to remember, not too far there, Karina. What you've got to remember is that you are less active in the tissues because you are getting a lot of help from your hands with that. So you've got to make sure there is enough activation in that lateral line for you to be able to get a stabilizing effect. Otherwise, we're not doing this, the 7 E's. The energizing and stabilizing isn't happening. So make sure you are getting the stabilizing effect by making sure there is enough energy going into that area, enough activation going into that area to stabilize it. Otherwise, you don't get to take it home with you, okay? It only happens in the room. You don't get to take it home with you because you haven't stabilized the tissue. You've only created the additional extensibility temporarily, but you can't support that additional end range. So that would be a real cracker for that one. Looks like you're having lots of fun with that. I'm glad to see. Let me have a little bit of a look in Auckland. Oh, it's just Nikki on the screen in Auckland. Hey, Nikki. There's Ahana. Good stuff. Beautiful. Yeah, that's a nice one too there, Emma. I'm glad I've got that on screen. Yeah, that's really good too. Just off to the side. All right. I hope Sarah's enjoying that. It looks divine. Yeah, good stuff. All right, I'm going to check what the next one is, team. Okay, I'm just going to finish off this hanging thing because there's a lot that involve it, kind of some version of hanging. And you've pretty much done them all in that one kind of little hanging section. So there's the full overhead hang, both hands on, feet on the ground, close together, driving into that. There's a single arm hang, driving into that. Then there's the hang from off to the side. You can have both hands on a door frame, for example. That's what I call the door frame hang. and drive into that. So everyone, the reason I include door frame, by the way, everyone's got a door frame normally. Even if they don't have a home, they can find a door frame to use, okay? So the door frame hang is very effective. And you can have both hands across your body driving into the long side, or as they were in Auckland there, you can just hold on to that at the side and use that as your guide to get you into that movement as well. The only one that we haven't done is for those people that just want to do it as part of their strength training work, and they're fully hanging with their feet off the ground and their legs are swinging side to side. So you're activating one lateral line in order to lengthen the other. And that can be quite effective for those people that actually want to target their thoracic more than anything else. So their thoracic lateral, and just get lateral swings. You're having to activate one line in order to create some length on the other. And it's quite rhythmical as well, so people quite like that. But it really brings a lot more into that rib cage area, doesn't it? That whole thoracic area, if you wanted to do that in terms of a full hang from that point of view. So we've done standing lateral hip swings, basic lateral hip drive with split stance, the hanging, single and both, hanging fully of what I've just talked about, and the door frame hang with the hands off to the side. So the one that we haven't done is the prone. Now let me know when you are ready to do prone. Yes, thank you, Corinne. And Auckland, you're ready to do prone? Great, all right. So this could be one of my favorites too. But as you probably gathered, because I'm a mobility tart, I have an awful lot of favorites, okay? But this one, when you get into that lateral chain, I'm going to show you a few versions just so that you can kind of really kind of appreciate how nice this is. So a lateral hip swing. So you remember a standing hip swing that we did against the wall just a short while ago. So this is a prone version of doing that. And dependent upon how much you want to get into that area is also dependent on how straight you have the knee. I'm going to start you off with bent knees. From the side, it's a push-up position, just FYI, okay? So here I am in that position, and I'm going to bring my left up and across under my body and drop the hip and then come back. I would say don't start it yet because I need to show you this from the side because there's a few mistakes that people will make straight away. So I'm sinking the hip towards the floor, keeping my elbows straight. Now let me show you from the side. I might just come over here. So here we are. I'm bringing this knee up and across. So I'm kind of at 90 degrees, bring it across, land it, then I drop the hip. But what I do not do, watch my back foot. I don't do this. Yeah? Because what I've done there is I've just rotated fully at the pelvis and the tissues are unchanged, okay? So you'll see that happen quite a lot. So you'll see someone go here and then go like this. So they'll be compensating at their foot and at their knee in order to get the hip to the ground. Most of the time, people won't get the hip to the ground. So they're here, drop at the hip only, come back. Drop at the hip only, come back. And the other thing is, I've mentioned it already, the knee. I don't keep their knee locked at the back. So again, knee, bang. Look how far I can go the moment I bend my knee. It's all about getting that extensibility through the hip and into this lower part of the lateral line. Also getting the rotational aspect of functional lines as well as the crisscross actions of the internal and external obliques. Try that first of all, and then if you want to extend the leg to challenge yourself a little bit more, i.e. open up that knee and then do a little bit like this, by all means do that. Quite often you will get little clicks happening in your lumbar. I absolutely welcome those. They feel wonderful. Let me know what you think of that once you've had a little bit of a go with that. So remember, elbows locked, back knee locked. Now, if you're trying to extend your leg and you end up with your leg almost next to your other leg, you're not ready to extend the leg yet. Just keep the knee bent and go with it as a bent knee across under your body, bent at 90. Slide it across, land it to the floor, and then bring the hip down. So we've got I think that's Maya in Wellington doing the down dog plus prone hip swing. See, so you see how you can combine these movements. Down dog to prone hip swing, look. Auckland, how are you liking that? Good stuff. I'm seeing some smiles. Here goes Emma. That's good. How you doing, Emma? That looked like a bit of stickiness for you. Interesting. All right. Right, Maya, you're ahead of the game. That's what we're going to do on the next slide, just FYI. So you're already onto deep front line there. I'm watching. It's okay. I don't mind you experimenting. I also saw, of course, I saw our one of our leaders there, Corinne, playing with some animal flow stuff. So she's getting ahead of the game too. So don't worry. Any questions for me on lateral line mobility? So remember, if people are showing limitation in their lateral line from the appraisal, this is your menu to look at. This is your menu to select from when it comes to that. Any questions for me on this? Or are we good? We're good. Good stuff. And then Nikki's just trying to help Emma into this movement in Auckland. So I'm going to push on. So we are into deep front line mobility. So let's just quickly recap on what the deep front line is. So remember the deep front line, the truth or the real you. JP's favorite line. That's it. I'm a nerd. I have a favorite myofascial line. And the reason I like it is actually because it has such connection with that kind of mental and emotional world. That's what I tend to see most in my clients is changes here when there's emotional issues from that point of view. As you can imagine, this is in the middle. This is in our center. It should be called our center line or our core line, really. So this center line, that actually is underneath these. These go over the top of the deep front line, over the top of the deep front line, over the top of the deep front line. So here we are. We want to actually experiment and get into this chain of tissue. We want to actually find a way of putting extensibility into those tissues. Let's put some dynamic, elastic movement through those tissue where we can explore end range gluiness, for want of a better term. Yeah, that's what we want to do. This is where we are. So it goes from the toes, tib posterior, popliteus, goes into the inside of the knee, becomes the adductors, pelvic floor, deep core muscles, diaphragm, holding every internal organ in place, like the pericardium, etc. Then up into the scalenes, and we're into the tongue and temples when we get to the top here. That's where the That's where the pterygoids live, which I thought were dinosaurs when Julie Hammond first mentioned them to me. Turns out they are myofascial tissues in the face. So you can see where they come to, right up here. Sorry, let's get in a bit closer there. Here they are, right at the side of the head there. So it's through our center. But what people kind of miss when it's because it's the deep front line is the fact that from the rear, you see it's still very much a chain of tissue from both sides. So what we need to do is find ways to connect with this center line. And there'll be one of the ones that I do through here, which actually looks more like it's a posterior thing, but it's actually still a deep front line, okay? So be aware when we're doing this stuff, this is the chain of tissue that we're looking to affect. Does it mean that it won't affect other things? No, of course not. We are doing whole body movements. Any whole body movements will affect your whole body. It doesn't matter, like you get a change in one place, it changes every place. Remember that. I know I keep saying it, but it's good to keep reminding you. We get change in one place, everywhere has changed. We get a change in one place, everywhere else is going to have to compensate, for want of a better term, as well. So remember, the reason that we're there in the first place is that quite often there are compensations in a body. We want to actually help relieve those compensations by creating new compensations. In other words, get them back to the point where the way our system is actually working is much more in balance, like so. So we're now in balance so that it springs back to the same shape, and it's a shape that actually works for us. It's a compensation that works for us, yeah? All right. I'm having fun. I hope you are too. We're going into the final slide for mobility, and we're into my faves, of course. So I'm a big fan of these ones, and they really speak to me. I think also you tend to like the ones that you've got good at as well over time. So I know there was I don't do yoga because I don't like the holds. I don't like those holds because my brain's just going, oh my God, I'm destabilizing tissue. What am I doing? So I don't like the holds so much. I think it's fantastic as a body mind thing. And I think it's great at the end of a day, not at the start of a day too. But you can talk about me another time about that. But when it comes to, I remember going to a yoga class one time, just a personal share here. I remember we had to get into some position, like we had to be here, and then you kind of pull your feet in, and then your feet come in there, and then your knees kind of go down like this, and then we're kind of like this here. And I remember a few people looking at me, and what I didn't realize was at the time that the instructor couldn't occupy the position that I could occupy. And I'm like, oh, great, there's one for the old guys, right? I've actually got a line that works really well for me. And I can actually say, hey, look, this is how it might look once you get down the line a little bit. But the irony was the knee bend is all important there, okay? That knee bend gives me a bit of extra range that I wouldn't otherwise have. You lengthen that leg, I've still got issues, as I have everywhere else. It's issues in the tissues, everyone. So let's get started. We'll give you the group one first of all with this one, okay? So the group one is really, really simple. I'm sure that if I was in that room right now and I asked, hey, do you know what, peeps? If we did a pigeon toe sit and reach for our superficial back line, what might be a way of using a sit and reach that would get to our deep front line? Wow, we need to open up through here. Could it be a sumo sit and reach, JP? And I would go, God, you're a genius. This is actually a really simple, basic way to do a movement which would get into that deep front line nice and easily. So remember, start with your metric, see where you are at the moment. Then come into this, go wide stance, turn the toes outwards and get into your sit and reach. If you want to put some butt shifts in there, in other words, a little hip shift at the bottom, do you know what? I'm not going to stop you, not at this stage of the game. I'm going to allow you a bit of leeway there. So play with that one. It doesn't exactly take long to get the hang of. And then I want to show you my absolute go-to, which is a sumo reach after this, okay? How easy is that? Liking a bit of low down butt action there. That's good. I can see everyone's outline. I wish I could see Pablo's facial expression when he grinds on that at the bottom there. That would be what I'd like to see, because I feel like it would be a really inappropriate facial expression when he's at the bottom of that. I know I would be pulling a very inappropriate face at that point in time. So while we're doing this one, I just want to kind of show you one of my other faves, which is a sumo reach. Now, this is a really great one. If you have people, and again, you know, those people we've talked about, they want it to be more dynamic. They actually want to feel like they're working when they're doing their mobility work. Okay. Well, yeah, we can do that for you, fella. So here's what we do. We put them into that sumo position. I'll show you from front and from the side for this one. We put them into that sumo position and we get them to reach as far forward as they can with a tall spine, as far forward as they can with a tall spine. This is very much a transverse plane action. I want to show you from the side. They stay low. They don't come back out. They roll and reach, roll and reach. You see that? So the knees are moving, but they're not collapsing. And you're reaching from the scapula. So in other words, you reach here. Sorry, I should show you from the side. This is an arm reach. This is a scapular reach. You get about an extra 8 centimeters of movement. That, staying low, do 30 seconds like that, they are going to know about it. So try that one. Stay down, 30 seconds. Remember, the hips should be moving through this. They don't stay rigid. It's not just like, let's reach with the arm in that low position. Your hips should rotate as you move your arm forward. Make sure that is happening, please. So hips rotating as your arm goes forward. Okay, so team, I'm going to get your eyes on me because I just want to give you a little nuance because I'm seeing a few bits happening in the room. They're not a problem, but they're different to what I've just taught. So what I'm seeing is this is what I just demonstrated. All right. What I'm seeing is this. All right. Now, is there anything wrong with that? No, it produces an effect of mobilizing the deep front line. Completely fine with that. What I've just done is I've rotated at the hips and then I've reached. Everything, I'm over the top of my pelvis, I'm over the top of my feet, and I'm in the middle of my feet the whole time. There isn't a big shift left and right of my butt. I'm here, I'm rotating through and reaching, rotating through and reaching. Sure, the butt looks like it's moving side to side, but not much, right? Now, this is totally fine. This is totally fine. Does it do the job? It absolutely does. But the purity of the sumo reach is that, straight out in front, not across the body. But then what you can do is you can play with arm drive. So what about if you want to do this or this? What you'll find is that that produces a different effect on your body as well. So play around with that and see if you get a bigger and better feeling from one of those arm drives or from one of those butt shifts. How are people liking that? Okay, is everyone ready to move to the next one? Great, thank you. So what we've just done there is sumo reach and sumo alternating reach. Yeah, so I just call it a sit and reach for groups. That's the basic one. And then the alternating reach is that one where you're playing around with arm drives. Yeah. The next one is like a lateral lunge position with hip sync and 3D motions. That sounds kind of awkward, doesn't it? But that's your one that you do in the appraisal. Yeah. So we're just going to extend its use a little bit. Okay. So just as a little reminder, we're still on the deep front line. We are now doing a movement that involves this action that you learn as the movement that you do in your appraisal. For me, this is quite a go-to movement for me as something that I would prescribe someone to take away as well. It's really quite exceptional from that point of view. I really, really like it. So that is a basic movement. It's a frontal plane movement, isn't it? Not a sagittal, it's a frontal plane movement. We sink into that and we come back. We put length through this tissue and then we come back. But there's a whole heap of other things that we can play with in that position, okay? So that's our basic action. What else can we do though? If I show you from the side, and these are the first couple of things I'll get you to try, is you can sink and then do sagittal. At end range, you do a sagittal movement. So in other words, you shift your hips back and forward and then come back up out of it. So you sink, shift, back forward, come back out. Yeah. Then what you can also do is sink, rotate, rotate, come back out. Remember, this leg stays straight. This one is the bent, softening leg. So rotate, rotate, come back out. Try those. Remember, check your metric. You might want to check this basic movement first. Which one is actually more limited at the moment? Go after the more limited one and then see how you go with those different kind of actions that we can add along the way. So remember, the side you are testing is your straight leg side. That's the side that we're playing with here, the straight leg side. I'm going to give you a hint. If you are getting massive movements at end range, you're not at end range. So make sure your body you're taking your body towards your straight knee. Body towards your straight knee. Thank you, Corinne. That's what I was looking at when I mentioned that. Once you've played with that a little bit, go back to your metric movement and see how you are doing. All right, team, we're going to push on. Everyone okay if I push on? So the variations with those are that we can create change using the sagittal and transverse planes when it comes to that, but we can also create change. And I'm not going to ask you to do this, by the way. Just watch for a moment because I want to get on to the next one. And that is that you can actually create change by using arms as drivers into that area as well. Often driving towards the straight side is actually the real money shot from that point of view. Okay, so be aware of that. So arm drives, multi-directional arm drives are great. The next one is what I call the single leg sit and reach. So in other words, sit reach, yeah? Single leg is we actually just take one straight leg and one bent leg and we do that sit and reach action and come back. It produces a different change and it takes it more into that lower part. So not in directly at the hip, but actually more down into the adductor and inside of the knee. So this one, you can actually shift all the way over if you want to, go to the other side. And you'll feel probably a difference between side one and side two. So you might want to do two on one side and one on the other. So for me, I want to bounce, come back and do another one on my inner right in order to do that. Have a play with that one and see what you think of that. Once you've done that, check how you are feeling through there. Good. I'm liking the multi-directional arm shifts as well to play with that. Really good, team. Really good. All right, I want to do a quick tutorial on foot position. It's not a difficult one. It's just an awareness piece, really. So with that, for some people, I'm seeing the foot turned outwards, some people foot straight. What's the right way of doing it? The way I teach is that both feet are facing forward, yeah? And we sink into that like that. But genuinely, it's the way that is most successful for your client. This is the way I teach. This is the way I feel gets the biggest and best benefit and creates a better alignment. But what we've got to remember is not everyone is me and not everyone is a neutral body. So what we want to think about is actually going, okay, then this might be the gold standard, as it were, having both feet pointing straight ahead. But actually, a lot of you are here. Is that a bad thing? Well, we got to remember that if you have turned your foot outwards, you are already in the transverse plane. Okay, so this movement is no longer a frontal plane movement, it's a transverse plane movement because you have created transverse plane by turning your toes outward. All right. So that, just in the same way, by the way, as if you were going to turn your toes inward, that would also be a transverse plane change. It'd be just a transverse plane which would affect you at the rear more than at the front, okay? So be aware of that. Be aware what you're already doing, because if that toe is turned out and that's what they want to do and that's where they're most comfortable, that's fine, but be aware that you're getting at the tissue deeper in the hip and more at the front. So be aware of that. This is much more frontal plane, balanced, equilibrium, whatever you want to do, and you're going after that stuff, and you're actually going after that fully in that frontal plane, which is what the plane of motion that you're working in, what you think you're working in as well. So that's kind of important, isn't it? Foot position is kind of important. However, what foot position is best for your client is the one where they can achieve success the best, and the one that they can achieve change the best, okay? But changing foot position changes plane of motion already. It's just like if I do a sit reach with my feet next to each other going straight ahead, okay, that's a sagittal plane motion. If I put left foot forward of my right, I'm doing a transverse plane sit reach there, okay? Whether you like it or not, that's a transverse plane action. It looks like a sagittal plane action, but the tissues are taking that on board as a transverse plane action because this hip has just got further away from this shoulder. So what we're doing there isn't equal anymore. We're putting more length through here than we are through here. Hence, transverse plane action, not sagittal plane action. Foot position matters an awful lot. However, it's very handy to know that if someone is comfortable with sagittal plane actions, but not with transverse plane actions, by changing foot position, turning them out, or putting one forward of the other, we are getting transverse plane force entering the system in a sagittal plane motion. Isn't that clever? So cool, that stuff. I'm going to hopefully keep your attention and go into, so we've done single leg sit and reach. Yes, okay then. Warrior hip turn, Austin. See, warrior hip turn and T-step. Now we're really getting into the sexy stuff for my liking. So let's go warrior hip turn. I'm demonstrating everything on my right. I don't know if you've noticed that, but I'm just, my right side is having a ball with this stuff. I've gone a little bit too much there. So everyone has probably heard of warrior pose in yoga. So that's like we're about to do our little hip sync movement, but that foot of the bent knee is going to turn 90 degrees away from that back foot here. So we're much more in warrior. Yeah, we're in kind of a warrior pose through here. And what this is a rolling action. So I grab hold of the pelvis. I get my client to grab hold of their pelvis. I want them to roll. So you find end range and roll back and roll back. So this is warrior hip turn. Yeah, I'm literally turning the pelvis into that action. So it's really for those people that right deep in the hip here, you really need to access that point there. You go into this position and you roll. So remember, check your metric movement. See how it's feeling. Which side? You might want to do this one to discover which side is still a bit gnarly, what's a bit grumpy through there. Then warrior hip turn. The straight leg is the side that you're testing. It's the side that you're trying to create extensibility in. Grab hold of that pelvis and roll that little sucker, because this is what makes the good times roll. If you seem to be moving a large amount with your upper body, I would suggest you go deeper into the action. So you bend your bent knee more and then you create that little roll because you're looking for that end range, little end range action. So the reason I get people to grab hold of their pelvis is because I want their upper body to move as much as their pelvis. I don't want it to move more. I don't want there to be twist in the spine. I want there to be rotation from the pelvis and the spine to follow. Okay, team, let me know when you are ready for the next little bit. Good in Auckland. Wellington, you just finish your point there and let me know if you are ready. Great, thank you. Okay, remember at this point, this is not normal, okay? We've done more than 20 mobility movements on your body. Maybe about 25 at this stage. It is not normal. Your body is going through a lot of change. It's not normal to have this amount of change. Some of you will be responding beautifully well to it, others not so well. Just be aware it is not normal, okay? I want to show you where we're going next because we are on the deep front line next, but we're in a very specific area that I want to create change in. But actually, yeah, and it's still a whole body. But this bit here, okay? Here we have piriformis, obturator internus, and levator ani. They're a little group of muscles, a little group of tissue called the deep external rotators. They are part of this whole deep front line, okay? They are responsible for basically turning feet outwards, okay? So for example, if I'm stood here and I turn my foot outwards, my deep external rotators have helped me do that in an isolated way. Just realized it's going to be handy for you to see my feet again for this next one. This should always pretty much be done barefoot, by the way, but I'm going to keep my shoes on just so you can see the position of my feet. So what we want to do is, this is still a deep front line mobilization that we're about to do, but it is for targeting the posterior hip, the deep front line at the posterior hip. And it is bloody brilliant. This one has so many benefits for so many people. I'm going to try and break it down a little bit for you, but educators in the room, you're definitely going to need to kind of show how the arch responds and things like that. So here's the way it looks. The change I want to make is on the side that does not move. Again, we're in relative motion land, okay? This is how it looks. Okay, so the grounded foot stays pointed straight ahead. The knee is bent, not just soft, bent. This hip, the opposite hip, turns fully to face this direction, this foot. And that foot follows what the hip is doing, okay? You don't leave that there and try and turn that hip. It doesn't allow enough hip turn. So this is turned, okay? Then there's an extra reach so that we get some extra extensibility from this shoulder to this hip. So here's what it looks like from the rear. Now, there are a number of things that are happening there. This is our go-to, the first thing to try if you have a low hip, okay? If you have a low hip, it's the first thing that you go to. because one of the things in about 50% of cases with a low hip is their deep external rotators are very overactive, and they are actually creating that pull in that side hip. Okay, so in my case, I have a right hip low. I would use my right leg as the stationary leg and turn into that. Once you've had a go with that, I want to kind of explain a whole heap of other things that it's doing, okay? Yes, Karina?
Could you just demonstrate how wide your left feet are again? How far
Sure.
your
Yeah, absolutely. So feet don't necessarily have to be massively wide for this one. They're wider than shoulder, but that's my starting point. Then I'm going to, well, in fact, I'll go into the other side this time. So I'm going to bend that knee, the one that I'm going to work into, and then this is just going to be turning, okay, and reaching. So if I go here, it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It means that my weight doesn't transfer effectively onto the stationary foot, okay? So with the weight, at least 80% of your weight should be on the side that you are trying to effect change in, okay? Here, bang, and come back. So yes, you may feel change happening deep under your butt through here, but of course you're going to feel change happening all the way up the outside of your leg because the foot is in that position, all the way up and across to your shoulder. But there are a whole heap of other things that are happening too. So have a little play, and then we'll get into all the other things that we can play with that particular movement, and stuff really that you should be aware of, because it is quite extraordinary what this movement can do. So this is a T-turn, but you can call it whatever you wish. Hip turn, rear hip turn, whatever you want to call it. All right, so I'm looking for everyone to gather, because there's a few things that I really want you to take away from this particular movement, because it is such a powerful movement in your menu of movements. So let me know when you're all ready to look and listen, and we will get into that, because there's a whole heap to cover on this one. Auckland, you're ready? All right, Wellington, let me know when you're ready. All right, Wellington, are you ready to receive more information? Yeah? Great, okay. All right, so that in itself is quite a powerful action, okay? It will help unglue that deep front line at the rear of the pelvis. What you'll also find is if people are glued there, my right deep external rotator group, that area of the deep front line, directly affects the inner hip on the opposite line. sorry, on the opposite side of the deep front line. Okay, so this is all deep front line. So can you imagine, you could have a situation where, like me, you're gluey in that right side. Okay, I'm a lot less gluey now, ironically, of course. So we've got this glue through here. But could it be that I'm not actually glued in the right inner hip? I'm actually glued in the deep external rotator group of the posterior hip on the left side, because I've seen this. So quite often what you'll get is the elasticity that should be here is actually being pulled through to here, okay? So here we've got a situation where this is gripping on and pulling and taking some of the elasticity from under here. So what it presents as is a restricted inner hip on the right, when actually it's a restricted posterior hip on the left. And once you release that, this suddenly has got a whole heap of movement. And the only way you find that out is by trying it, if that's what you suspect. So that's number one thing to remember for that one. Then number two is that, as I was saying earlier, if you have a low hip, so someone has a low hip, about 50% of the time over the last 10 years of about 1,000 clients, about 50% of the time when there is a low hip, what I have found is that the reason that hip's gone with gravity is because of stickiness in the deep external rotator group. And I do this, maybe 8 repetitions of this with that client, i.e. the stationary leg is the side that we want to work. The stationary leg is the low hip leg. Work them into there, and I come back and I recheck their hip height. They are level, okay? So it's that simple for like half of the cases that you'll see with a low hip. It is that simple. So again, that T-turn is very, very useful with that. The other thing that I'm really going to kind of hone in on for you here, I'm going to bring my camera to the floor because, in fact, let's bring it even closer. Because what happens here, okay? So you will have people that come in with flat arches, yeah? So they're right down here, kind of like that, with flat arches. You get them barefoot. These two joints drive into the ground when you are doing a T-turn, okay? I'm going to stand up in just a second. What I want you to watch is the action that happens in the arch, okay? So I'm going to step up. I'm basically straddling you now, everyone. And then I'm going to do the turn. Can you see the action that's happening through there? I'm unloading here, yeah? Then I turn towards that, and then I'm reaching now, and then I come home. I open up, then I turn, reach, and then come back. Okay, so what have we got here? Someone comes in. They have collapsed arches. Their knees are collapsing inwards as a result of the collapsed arches, yeah? We're getting a bit of this going on. So what do we want? We actually want this knee to come out and this arch to start supporting the rest of the leg. How might we do that? Well, if we do this knee is driven outwards. This is stabilizing up through here because it's got a little bit overly long in that position, yeah? This is stabilizing up through here, and we're massively activating the arch of that foot. And then this just puts the icing on the cake and helps with this. Now, when those arches collapse and the knees go in, guess what also happens? Well, the feet go out a little bit, don't they? So those feet going out means that here, remember the deep external rotators are responsible for that, okay? So here tends to get a bit gluey. So what are we doing for that person who's got the outturned foot, the collapsed arches, the inward turning knee, and the sticky deep external rotators? With this one movement, we are going tick, 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 da-da, I'm here all week, right? With that one action, it changes everything. Because, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but everything's connected to everything. So that T-turn is quite an extraordinary action, movement, motion, whatever you want to call it, That is an extraordinary movement to remember when it comes to doing anything with collapsed arches, with inner hip issues, with low hip issues. That is like a go-to action. And it helps so many things. It also does spiral line, functional back line. It's everything, okay? What have we got here? Lateral hip swing also does ankle supination and pronation nicely. So, and not just that either. So to get pronation and supination in there, there's a whole heap of stuff where you'll get that. It is quite an extraordinary, if you watch what happens at your feet, tune in interoceptively what happens at your feet to get that supination, pronation happen. There's a whole heap of these mobility movements that do that along the way. I want to wrap up the deep front line, and then we'll take a little break before we get into some training. So we've got T, so I've got it still listed as T-step. It should be T-turn. The reason it's called T-step is because what I used to do is rather than just turn the hip like I do now, which I find more stable, I used to kind of get people to come fully round so that actually, as they bring that round, it forms a T with the 2 feet. It was so unstable that I changed it, but I never changed the name of it. So that's why it's got a weird name. Prone hip swings and prone froggy child's pose. Maya, I noticed, was already onto this earlier on. You know, when we were doing the prone hip swings, for the lateral line, in fact, let's get some, I might just bring the mat into this as well so you can actually get a little bit of what's going on here. Yeah, so we were doing the ones for the lateral line earlier, weren't we? Dropping into that and coming back and dropping into that. There's your lateral line, but also your functional back line too. But equally, we can bring them up and out and drop in like this. And like this, okay? Now you've got to be very careful for people if they're at all compromised in their lumbar spine. Guess what? How would we do this for someone with a compromised lumbar spine? Guess what we wouldn't do? We wouldn't do it in the first place. All of these things aren't for everybody. I've said that earlier, but I just want to reinforce that. People go, oh no, that causes a few problems with this person because of this. All right, use one of the other 7. It's fine. You know, don't feel that you have to make it work for someone if it just doesn't work for someone. It's just the way it is, right? Everyone's different. But can you see, as I come out here, I'm going to drop into that. I'm trying to keep my back knee locked. It is locked, believe it or not, even though it doesn't look it. And I'm going to drop into that with straight elbows and come back. Now, for me, this one isn't great for my deep front line, but it's really amazing for my superficial front line because we're doing both. And here's the beauty of mobility is when you get them both at the same time. So if I'm doing my left inner hip, my left deep front line, I'm also doing my right superficial front line. That works really well for me because I want a little bit more in my superficial front anyway. So that's the way you can do. So could you then do lateral line into deep front line, which also happens to do your anterior chain, your superficial front line too? Absolutely, you could. Have a little play with that and then come back to me for the final one. All right, crew, when you are ready for the final one, let me know. I can see Auckland are ready. Pablo hasn't quite killed Madre yet, so Wellington probably aren't ready yet. Cool. I can see the leg being extended over there in Wellington. That's another progression. But it's going to be a progression more for coaches than it is clients, that's for sure. All right, Wellington, let me know when we can do the final one. We're there. Great stuff. All right. Final one for the deep front line is, we call it prone froggy. It's like a prone froggy child's pose. It's really beautiful. I really love it. And it's also very calming for the nervous system as well. So let me show you body position wise how we do this. I'll show you front on and side on, I think, be the way to go. So we're looking for people to get their knees as wide as possible. And in my case, I like to get the toes. I don't know if you can see my toes there, but my toes, my big toes are touching. So I go wide as they're comfortable to go, toes touching at the back. You come forward, and everyone thinks that when I do this, as I sink back, they actually think that that's what it's all about. It's actually when you come up with straight elbows and bring your hips through, that's the money shot. That's when it all happens, okay? And then you're coming back like so. So it's like a moving child's pose. But what we're doing is we're looking to create that change up and over. Remember, elbows stay straight, bring the hips through. If they have anything worried about their lumbar spine, please don't do it. Come all the way back, go again. Bring the hips through. If people can't get their hips through, they're just stuck here. It's not suitable for them. You need to use one of the other movements, or just explain to them that's where you can go to. That's your thing. If you're feeling massive tension there, that's where you're going to go to. So it's this beautiful, lovely, relaxing action, back and forth. Try that one out. As I say, it's very, what should I say? It's very good for the nervous system. It really helps with the nervous system because it is told that everything is safe in the world, because you've got all these points of contact with the ground, and you've got all the and the nervous system is calmed by that. Then you do the action, and it does tend to create some good change for a lot of people. All right. Now, for some reason, I'm seeing extended legs in Wellington. Have you already progressed the movement? Has everyone done the original movement? Because everyone seems to have progressed to that. Yeah, okay. So there's a progression being done in Wellington. This is what it looks like. Would I be saying that I'm going to be giving most of my clients this? Absolutely not. I'll be saying coaches might be interested in that. Clients would not. Okay, we as coaches, we've got to remember our egos take over, and we want to do all the really hardest stuff that brings the biggest range of mobility. Most of the people we see don't have what you have. So be aware, this is for you, but it's probably not going to be for your clients. I would prefer that you knew the ones for your clients really intimately, and then these ones you can play with for yourselves. All right, team, let me know when you've had your fill of that one. Remember, go back and check your movement and see how it's all feeling. Hopefully people in general have free and stable bodies. I really, really hope that's the case. But if you are struggling, it's not normal to do 30 mobilizations on a single body. That's not normal at all, is it? So we're going to take a break very shortly. I just want to quickly make sure that I've gone through the little markers that you need to be aware of. Okay, we're looking to create change, much more behind the scenes change than conscious change. Our only conscious action is getting into the movement pattern, but everything else happens as a result of movement, which is much more unconscious in nature. We are playing around with variability. We're playing around with directions of action. We're using the whole body. Up until you got a little bit carried away there, we were trying to keep it regressed, but there are always ways of progressing. Why I would suggest, if you want to get good at this stuff, you get good at regressing. Incidentally, I don't like the word regressed. I like the word a different version. I never use the word regressed because I feel like we're actually saying to our clients, they're a little bit shit and they need to be regressed. They need to be taken back to their childhood because they're so rubbish. So I just say we're going to do a different version of it for you. We're interacting with all those nerve endings in our bodies, and the viscoelasticity has been tested and challenged and assisted. That movement, that constant elasticity, that means that we're not going to get the tissues to shut down and go all useless on us. It's actually going to create that pumping effect. We're going to actually up-regulate the system. We're going to activate the system. Is it going to improve slide and glide? Yes, absolutely it is. And remembering that tissues travel body-wide. So absolutely, this is a big block that you're going to need to practice, and you're not going to know just like that. You know, that was a lot of information, a lot of movements that are new to you. So don't expect to be an expert in 30 mobilizations by Monday. That's okay. We've put the groundwork in now. We've given you the basics. Now it's a matter of practicing. Just like with any exercise, with any new technique, with anything that you want to learn and get good at, it's just a matter of now doing the work, right? Any questions for me at all at this stage? Yes, Karina.
Just going back to the that foggy one at the end.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we did put our leg out.
Yeah.
Is that, you know, is that where you can also check to see if one side was more restricted than the other? A little bit like when we did the squat, we put one foot in front, not the squat, when we did the good mornings.
Yeah.
With that, or was it just that it's too advanced not to do it?
I think you could use that as a check, but a lot of people wouldn't even be able to extend their leg. That's kind of my point around that one. So, but it would be a way of doing that, or you could just drop to one elbow on one side would be the other way to check one side compared to the other. Or you could bring one arm and bring it here as a way of doing that as well. So here you are, and you just go, okay, then I'm just going to check there. Okay, then that's what I feel there. That's what I feel there. The moving arm will check the opposite hip. So that's another way of kind of playing with that and just checking if there's any difference from side to side. But we need to kind of use movements that are successful for people. We got another one? We're all done. Great stuff. Okay. We're going to take a break because when we come back, we need to check in on the body audit to see how you're feeling and then get into some flow. Now, is 20 minutes going to be what you need? Is 20 minutes about be enough? Yeah, 20. Good stuff. And Auckland 20, is that okay?
20 minutes for what? Sorry, did you say for the
for a break? For a break right now. Yeah, so
I think maybe shorter. I don't know.
We can go shorter. Auckland, could you go shorter? Yeah, okay. 15 max. Be back in 10. We're starting 15.
15, thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Mr. Polly, are you there?